of today, and so I'm going to push off yours. So sorry, and I'll leave the words to Walid to finish up the afternoon there.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Walid Al-Bazoon. Originally, I am from Basra University in Iraq. I'm a visiting scholar at the University of Chichester. My research is based on the image of the interpreter. I'm taking you from the world of reality and fact to the world of fiction and literature. The image of the interpreter as a traumatic figure in two novels written by two Iraqi novelists, Halak Shakir's The Symmetry of the English, published in 2014, and Shakir Nouri's The Green Zone. Both are Iraqi writers. My argument, these are the covers of the two novels. This is Halak Shakir's The Symmetry of the English, and this is Shakir Nouri's The Green Zone. My argument is that I argue that these two novels, though written by two different writers from different generations, they depict a traumatic figure for the person or the character of the interpreter. The interpreter is represented by these two novels as a lost figure, as a person who is treated as a traitor, a collaborator, and we will go through what does it mean to be a collaborator or a traitor, or to be in a state of trauma while you are a citizen of Iraq. Interpretation and translation as a job, and this is, I mean, inside the two novels. Both novelists represent the protagonist's need for the job because of their economic needs. We are dealing with these two novels, which are written after the occupation of Iraq in 2003. So what is written in these two novels is a reflection of what happened in Iraq after this year, 2003, and what happened after that to people, to the state, to all the country, to regime, and specifically to the interpreters. So the characters, the main characters who are interpreters in these two novels, they become interpreters because they were in need of money. Second, both novels depict that job, which is interpretation, as risky, dangerous, fatal, and threatening. Three, the job leads to running away or to death. So the interpreter, either he flees away to another country from Iraq, or he is killed if he stays in Iraq. This is the fate that they face. The symmetry of the English. Just to give a brief introduction about the symmetry of English. In Basra, in Iraq, Basra is in the south of Iraq, there is a symmetry for the English soldiers. And this symmetry was built during the First World War to include the graves of the British soldiers and the other soldiers from the other nationalities who were in the coalition forces at that time. So it was built during the First World War, and it includes the dead soldiers from the First World War and also the Second World War. So the writer Halak Shakir, he uses this symmetry of the English as a title for his novel for its symbolic value. You know, we'll talk about that later. Just a brief plot description. We have an unnamed young man kidnapped and shot near the symmetry of the English. His soul goes to a female interpreter's room, which is adjacent to the symmetry. Her name is Noor, the interpreter's name, a young journalist and interpreter working with an American journalist called Hans. Both Noor and Hans were kidnapped, and they were threatened at the beginning, and then they were kidnapped, and then they were tied, folded hands and eyes, and they were shot dead by militias, unknown militias, in Basra. Why? Because Noor is working with a foreigner, and anyone who works with a foreigner is called a traitor at that time. What is important in the novel is the use of fantasy, and all of us know that fantasy is the imagining of something impossible or improbable, which is the imagining of improbable things or impossible things. So a lot here in this novel, the novelist uses fantasy just to depict what was going on in Iraq in a fantastical mood and style and narration, because what happened at that time, specifically during the sectarian conflict, which started in 2004 till 2007 in Iraq, sectarian conflict between the Shia and Sunni on a sectarian basis. So during that conflict, many people were shot dead. Some of them were kidnapped, tortured, and then they were shot dead. And specifically in Basra, they were thrown in the cemetery of the English, in this spot. So the novelist uses fantasy as a style of narration. Why? To create a space between reality and illusion, where the characters move freely and comment on what happened to them, as if they were still alive. So the unnamed narrator, the first narrator, we don't know his name, but when he is shot in the cemetery of the English, dead, he's kidnapped and shot, his soul flies to Noor's room, which is adjacent to the cemetery. It is not his body, his soul. Allah narrates in this way, his soul flies to this room. So we are giving this fantastical style to represent and to reflect on the chaos, the state of violence that happened at that time. So the first narrator is killed, but he flies to Noor's room. The novelist builds his narration on this fantastical mood to give the reader an image of the horror and terror of what happened to his characters at the hands of militias. And I agree with Joanna Ross in her interpretation of fantasy. Just a definition, fantasy is what couldn't have happened. That's to say, what cannot happen, what cannot exist. And at the end of the quotation, fantasy violates the real. What is the real? The real is the kidnapping, the folding of the eyes for no reasons, just on sectarian basis. This is reality. This is what happened at that time, sectarian violence. So by using fantasy, Allah, the novelist, he tries to deny, to break that reality into fantastical style, to show this abnormality and inhuman violence towards his characters, and insist on this denial throughout. Fantastical reality as an example. Noor and the unnamed narrator are two fictional examples of the people who get killed in Basra after 2003. Noor is followed by militiamen who threaten her because she works with Hans. Hans is an American journalist. He came to Basra after 2003 in order to document, to write a book on what is going on in Basra after the occupation of Iraq. So he needs an interpreter, Noor. She interprets for him, she works as an interpreter, and he is her own employer. But militias, they see them together, go and come and eat and sit and go for interviews with people in the street. This is why they try to warn them, which it doesn't work, and then they send messages to them, and then at the end they kidnap them. So later they were found, Noor and Hans are kidnapped by two men in a police car. They were kidnapped in a police car, and the novelist stresses this idea, how militias use police car at that time. What does it mean? This means that there is a sort of chaos. There is no management or good, what we can say, security administration at that time. It was a security chaos at that time. This is why militias may and can use the police car at that time to kidnap and kill people. Later they were found and bullets penetrated their heads and chest, and their eyes and hands were tied. Their corpses were thrown near the cemetery of the English in Hakimiyya district in Basra. Look what Noor tells Hans before their death, which is very important. She narrates as if she gives a summary of her inside fear. I want to tell you that since the breakout of the war, 2003, fear lives with me. Fear of death, which destroys everything in me, my senses, emotions, and desires. The emotions and senses and the desire to do what? To live, to survive, to continue living. But fear tries to what? To impose itself on her identity. I become another human being, someone different from me. I watch the children while playing and don't feel afraid of death. The young people laugh and behave courageously. Even the men and old people meet together and talk about the war as if it were a football match. What does this mean? She gives us an image for Iraqi people. I mean, the noblest. They take death for granted. They don't care about bombs or shells or bombardments. They don't care about even kidnapping. But there is still fear inside Noor that one day she will be picked up by militias. The idea of othering, we, us, they, them. How do people, or specifically militias at that time, see the foreigners in Iraq after the occupation of Iraq? Of course, they see them as others. Hans, Noor's employer, is a journalist. He is not a military man or a soldier, but he is seen by militias as an other, as a different, as an enemy. The militias specify Hans as a foreigner, an other and an enemy, and Noor, though she is a citizen, Iraqi citizen, is a traitor. I agree with Stuart Croft, who discusses the idea of othering. Discourse, which is the idea of to use the speech, and to use the speech to signify that you are with us or against us. Discourse creates and reflects identities. And thus they construct those who are our allies and those who are our enemies. When not in flex, they settle who we are and who they are, what we stand for and what they mean to us. So it is all othering about our identities and how we look at our identities and how we look at other different people as different identities and as enemies. In a similar othering context from the way the militiaman stops and threatens Noor, one may understand that foreigners in Basra at that time are designated as others or as enemies, and anyone working with them will be targeted. So this is a new, this is a new view that started after the occupation, that anyone is seen befriending, working with these foreigners is considered as an other, just like the foreigners, and will be targeted. The state of creating barriers by the militias endangers Noor's and Hans' existence. The writer stresses, the novelist, a predominance of a culture of creating terror and fear on the basis of us and them, a culture reasserting itself in reaction to the war and the occupation. So what is the reason behind this othering, this differentiation between us and them as foreigners, as different? This reason comes from the war and from the occupation. And also it comes from what the forces did at that time to Iraqis, regardless what kind of forces, maybe American forces, British forces, Danish forces, because there are many forces that participated in the war. The Green Zone. This is the second novel by Shakir Nouri. The Green Zone tells the story of Abram, who used to work in an English library before the war on Iraq in 2003. And after the war, he has no job. The library was closed, and he was employed by the Marines, the American Marines, to work as interpreter. He falls in love with another interpreter in the camp, Vivian, or her real name is Aliyah, because most of the interpreters in Iraq, they used fake names or nicknames just to hide their real identities and names. So Abram, he falls in love with Fabian, who's kidnapped by militias and starved. She's not shot, she was left in one area, starved to death. And he seeks the assistance of the American Marines with whom they work, but they didn't do nothing. They did nothing for them. And asked by the American forces to save his beloved, revenges Vivian's death by detonating an explosive belt in the middle of an American party in the Green Zone. This is at the end of the novel as an act of revenge against the Americans. So this is the broad summary of the novel. And we talk about the trauma. In this novel specifically, we have two different traumas. Trauma of the local interpreters, which is very important. The Green Zone focuses on the trauma of more than 5 Iraqi interpreters. And we have another trauma, the trauma of the American soldiers. What happened to the American soldiers after the occupation of Iraq? Is it an easy occupation? What happened to them? Trauma after that, right? Psychological trauma. Some of them, they were mutilated. They lost hands, legs, and so on. So 5 Iraqi interpreters, Abraham, Murad, Rashid, Kamil, Vivian, because of the violence. Why they were traumatized? Because of the violence that dominates Iraq at that time. These interpreters face difficult experiences. Because these interpreters go into patrols, into the streets with the forces. They go to police stations, they go to streets, roaming the streets, just to prevent the crimes, just to stabilize the security. So they were seen face to face by local people going with the Americans. And this causes their death or kidnapping later on. So they feel, just like Noor in the Cemetery of the English, she feels fear inside her. She's not stabilized psychologically because one day she will be targeted. So these 5 interpreters, they feel the same feeling of fear as Noor in the previous novel. The interpreters complained about having green cards because they are less than the blue cards carried by the Americans, which allow them to enter from the secure gates. And this is a quotation: we are prevented from using the interpreters, the local interpreters here. They are prevented inside the camps, the American camps, and even the British camps in the south of Iraq. Prevented from using the mobile phones, the internet, the email, the computers, the video games, the cameras, the gyms, the swimming pools. So they feel sad. Why? Because there are another side of what we can say international interpreters who were brought by the forces to help them at the beginning of the occupation. They have rights more than the local interpreters. They have cell phones, mobiles, they can do whatever the soldiers have and do inside the camps. This is why the local interpreters were very sad. And this is what Nouri tries to register in his novel. The international interpreters, their salary is $145,000 per year, whereas the local interpreter's salary is $5,000. And look at the discrepancy between the two, sums of money. And local interpreters, they get threats, kidnapping, and get shot in the streets. Whereas the international interpreters, they work on base, inside the camps, inside the headquarters. They don't go outside the camps, which is very important, not to get threatened. They don't leave the green zone, and they translate only the confidential documents in comfortable offices. Abram, the protagonist, describes these differences. Abram, in this quotation, is very, very angry, okay? Because the local interpreters, they have not the same rights as the international interpreters. I will skip that. The interpreters and the threat and violence, and the green zone characters suffer from threats and violence. We said that. What happened to the local interpreters? I have just put headlines. Rashid, one of the local interpreters, is threatened by one of his members of his family. who considers him as a shame. To work with the Americans is a shame for the family, he said, one of the relatives. And he threatens him that one day he will kill him. This is why Rashid, he runs away to next door neighbor, Iran, to save himself. Vivian's family received many threats. Every member of her family receives a threat letter. And at the end, her uncle was shot, dead. Because why? Because she continues to work in this camp with the Marines. Kamil gets a political asylum to the USA, another interpreter, also flees away from the country. Murad gets wounded and lost one of his legs in one of the explosions that targeted their patrol. And this is very important. And this brings the difference between international interpreters, their tasks inside camps, and the local interpreters, their tasks outside the camps and how it is violent. And most of the explosions, they were targeting the civilians in supermarkets and local markets. And we see that interpreters go in patrols with the army to these supermarkets and markets and cities. And what happened to the soldiers, they will have the same fate. The car explosions and bombings caused deaths of soldiers, interpreters, and civilians. And here there's a quotation about these explosions. Vehicular bombs can be very large, often in the 1000 IB class, and are usually delivered by suicide drivers. Until now, we as Iraqis, we don't know, because the government, they say we check. They do checking on what happened and who do it, but there are no results at the end. Because we, since 2003 till this day, we want to know who did it and why they did it, why they kill civilians in the markets. Okay? They kill soldiers and interpreters, we know why. Because these are considered collaborators and traitors, and the forces are considered as occupiers. But why they do kill civilians? I don't mean that I accept killing people, soldiers or terrorists. No, but we wanted to know why and who has done it. So many vehicular bombs are directed against civilian targets, such as public ceremonies and marketplaces, to inflict as many casualties as possible, and I agree with this quotation. The interpreters' collective trauma. We have individual trauma, if it happens to one person, one individual, and we have collective trauma if it happens to more than one character. Collective trauma leads to loss of trust, or it has two edges, either to loss of trust or the collective traumatized people, they come together as a matter of solace, as a matter of stability, because they feel the same feeling all together. Fear? Yes, fear. Trauma? Yes, it's trauma. Pain? It is pain. So they narrate one to another one, you know, one to each other. They narrate their stories together to have this sense of solace. So their collective trauma is an indication of their tragic loss. What kind of loss? What the interpreters, they have lost. They have lost this sense of security and safety, okay? And they cannot live without it. It's very difficult. Kai Erikson, he is one of the experts in trauma theory. He defines or discusses collective trauma as a blow to the basic tissues of social life. So when a collective trauma happens to a society, to a group of interpreters, this will break their trust in what? In the community they live, in the society they live. This is why the interpreters in the novels and in reality, they don't have a trust in anyone outside the camp. Because anyone may be an informer. Anyone may attack them at any moment. Social life to the scaffolding of trust constructed by families, communities, and nation. This is true in the case of Abram and his wife Vivian, whose marriage, they got married at the end, but their marriage doesn't continue because of her kidnapping and killing. And true of Murad, whose dream of becoming a filmmaker, he has an aspiration in the past, before becoming an interpreter, to be a filmmaker. But it vanishes, okay, after being an interpreter and after losing one of his legs. The American soldiers and the war. This is the second kind of trauma. We talked about the trauma of the interpreters and now the trauma of the soldiers. And we know through the media that many soldiers who came back home, some of them they committed suicide. Some of them they were kept in clinics for psychological therapy. Why? Because they have seen many violent events in front of them, many corpses. So the writer depicts a group of American soldiers who try to stand against the war by making a music band. So he gives us the Marines group with whom the interpreters work. They are against the war, okay? But they make a music band, they write songs which are against the war. But the colonel, he doesn't accept it, but they don't care about it. So Richard, Bachelor, Patricia, Johnny, and Nell, they are the American Marines with whom the Iraqi interpreters work. Their music and songs stand against the war. They come from different origins and don't see that people, Iraqi people, are terrorists, but just normal people. One of them, the head of the band, he said, when we go into the street, we see Iraqi people, but we don't see terrorists. We see normal people who don't understand our language. So, for example, when we say, move your car, he stays in his place because he doesn't understand their language. This is why they shoot. So these people, the Iraqi people, for Nell, the Marine character, they are not terrorists. I don't see terrorists, but ordinary pedestrians who cut the road at night, or those who don't understand English and don't stop their cars when asked to do so by the soldiers. That's all. Should we kill them because they didn't understand what we said to them? Do we kill those people because they step by their feet on their land? And I think this is a message by the novelist, the last line. I may repeat it. Do we kill those people because they step by their feet on their land? Is it because they live on that country we kill them? But there are reasons for killing, as he explains. The American soldiers' trauma. I think I'm short of time. Sorry. So I skip now. We have one of the American soldiers who is very traumatized. His name is Batista. Is that correct? Spanish name, Batista. He opens fire on the demonstrators in the streets, okay? And he kills, in the quotation, he describes this quotation. I received the orders to kill. And during the 3 seconds, I took my gun, and during, here he describes minutes, he kills more than 12. But these demonstrators, they don't have guns. They're just shouting against the occupation. So